And Jonathan says, that's what I meant to ask, when you wear a new pair of socks each day, are they brand new, as in never worn before? What do you think, I'm buying second-hand socks? Of course they're brand new. Why would I be buying second-hand socks?
Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
12:18 is the time. Jonathan in Deal is very cross. He says, James, you've only gone and done it again. You said comprised of. Grrr. It's like saying contains of. I let it go a couple of times before, but it's getting way out of hand now, mate. Someone's got to stand up for what's right. I'm so sorry. Is that comprised of? So what would you say? Comprising? I also said normalcy earlier, which is, of course, the noun that comes from normality. It's not a synonym for normality. John was very cross about that. I'm all for the grammar police on this programme. I live in eternal hope of grammatical perfection. So I will try and excise that phrase and indeed that word, or that misuse of that word, from my vocabulary henceforth. It's good to know you're concentrating. A lot of these mistakes are deliberate, like putting banana in the middle of an essay just to see whether or not your teacher is actually reading it.
Same subject, this comes in. This is great. Jonathan, Nick, you're an idiot. People in a doctor's waiting room are usually ill. It's a great place to catch an illness. It's much better to be triaged on the phone. It's not a recreational pursuit. And then Jonathan says, great show. That is genius. Nick, you're an idiot. And then you conclude with great show.
Okay, let's talk about fish. Let's talk about level playing field. But let's talk about, more importantly, tomorrow. What's going to happen tomorrow? Will we end up with a no deal? Or are you feeling more optimistic? And B, if that's the case, do you feel the government has let you down? They've had all this time to do this, and we've got nowhere near it. Ian, I think no deal was Johnson's plan all along, says Jonathan. I don't think that. I think he wanted a deal. He must know that any deal will be unsatisfactory for most. He'll be held responsible for brokering it. No deal can be blamed on those pesky foreigners for not playing ball. He'll obviously claim he tried his very best. And here's
and it's a picture, actually, of Frith Street in Soho when it's very quiet with Little Italy. That's why I said, is it a photo? Because it's obviously on a wet day. Do you know, the pavement markings are terrible, aren't they? Look at that. You'd never know that was a painting, would you? I would have thought that was a photograph. But it's not. It's lovely. Mind you, it's a bit expensive for me. It's £2,600. Unfortunately, I wonder if that would be tax deductible. It's 40 by 40. So 40 is quite large, but that's lovely, isn't it? Isn't that clever? Oh, it is a painting. You can see when you do a close-up of it. But even so, isn't that so clever? I can do that. I can paint things. Unfortunately, I'm more sort of concentrating on the human form. You know, I just do nudes. It's a lot easier. Unfortunately, nobody very keen in this company.
Matters worse. Rob, all I would say is how is buying Land Rovers, how is making Land Rovers and shipping them in Ethiopia going to make it better? And Jonathan in Deal has also decided I'm a racist, I think. I was wondering how or when you would start blaming foreigners for this, and here it is. And do listen, it's foreign aid that I'm questioning, not foreigners. And by the way, my last name is a bit of a clue to my view on foreign people. If you think about it, Jonathan, might be too complex for you.
It's for years. Somebody says you seem to be obsessed with Meghan and Harry. No, if they make the papers, I'll explain it to you, because you're not the brightest, Penny. So it's a case of if they're in the papers, we have to mention them. It says people are not interested in Meghan and Harry. No, but the papers put them... You have to explain it to somebody. You're obviously not the brightest penny in the box, are you? This is Jonathan in Deal, poor soul. And he says, when I switch the radio on in the morning, it's usually still tuned to LBC. But most of the time you're saying something awful about someone. You're obviously listening to the wrong show, Jonathan. But there we go, you are in Deal. Kent. I rest my case. No, we mention if it's in the papers. You know, ask the producer. He'll tell you. Ask anybody. I mean, apparently you're sort of the odd exception. Odd being the main word. And then somebody says, wonder what went wrong in your childhood for you to build a career on bad-mouthing other people.
Hopefully, Anne, that was the point. Excuse me, I was trying to get across. We also talked about the fact that it's going to spend £3 billion on buses. Jonathan says, I live in Northbourne, a village near Deal in Kent. It's pretty rural. One of the reasons we moved here was the bus service. A few years ago, it was cancelled. We have a car, but there's at least one family here who doesn't. There are many older folk who are now stranded. There's always a taxi, but that's not an option for some. No, I agree with you on that. And then
people who don't want to hurt animals, though. I'm vegan. I rescue abused animals. It's a shame you talk about vegans with such disgust. You need to listen to the programme properly. I can't help it if you're not the brightest person in the book today. No, I have a producer who's a vegan. and he's vegetarian, and he's flexitarian as well. And he's very happy with the show, so mind your own business, OK? Nothing worse than a little sort of curtain twitching. Oh, curtain twitchers. Oh, dear. So bad, so bad. Though loads of people, I'm amazed how many of you have got real fires.
Jonathan says, Richard, so the mayor isn't a great tie wearer. Boris Johnson does wear a tie, but won't comb his hair. Not even for Prince Philip's funeral. I'm glad you're enjoying the programme, Jonathan. Yeah. I do wonder about Boris Johnson's hair. And it was very wild at Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday. He looked like he just stepped out of a wind tunnel. What is it with his hair? Why can't he just comb it down? It's very odd, that. Ali is in Tower Hamlets. Ali, good morning.
Greenpeace protesters in the Southern Ocean trying to stop the Japanese whaling industry. Well, Vince, thank you very much indeed for that. Jonathan, who's down in Deal, says, may I just have a quick rant? Well, certainly. About the language that's constantly used, the French. Now, whether one believes it's the responsibility of the French authorities to protect our borders for us or not, it's not the French, it's the French authorities. He likes to make the point that it's a great show, but get that right. You got it. Thank you very much indeed. Well, it's a bit like talking about China later on. It's not the Chinese people, it's the Chinese Communist Party who have completely closed ranks and refusing to answer questions about the missing tennis player, Peng Shuai.
I mean, honestly, fancy not knowing the answer was the embarrassing thing. When did Rambo ever say, I'll be back, says Jonathan? Every day. It was, he always said it. Sylvester Stallone always used to say it. When he got home to his wife and she'd say, when are you going to be home? He said, I'll be back. And I remember thinking to myself, that was, don't play games with me, pal. You might. And then it was stolen by the Terminator, who came up with, I'll be back. Because he sort of puts on the affected voice, I'll be back kind of stuff. And we all go, yeah, lovely. I used to know him, actually, Arnie, when he was just a little Austrian model trying to sort of get one of those bull workers out of a box. You ever see a bull worker?
She couldn't hear you properly for some reason. He was very anxious. Well, I'm not quite sure about that one. This from Jonathan. However much you hate XR for making some people late for things or causing the possibility of an ambulance, they surely can't be responsible for Afghanistan. Of course they're not responsible, but surely it is not, I believe, it is not the time to be dancing. By all means have your demos, I'm not saying you don't. But anyway, let's get more calls on this.
Whether or not you really need to buy something, you have to ask yourself the question, should I be buying it? Apparently, Jonathan says they kill the snakes because many people just love to kill. It's really that simple. They've been doing it since the 1700s. It's not something new. But I remember watching it on the television some years ago and thinking to myself, what on earth are they doing that for?
Ian, yes, it's possible we'll need a vaccination every year, just like the flu vaccine. And the problem with that is? Exactly. Quite, Jonathan.
Jonathan in Deal says, I'm vegan. It was strange having the vaccine, but I had to have it. I don't want to die from COVID. And if I did, who'd look after my rescue animals? That's my rationale. Yeah. I don't... If something's free, why would you not want to have a vaccine which would help you sort of battle it? You stand a much better chance of surviving COVID if you've been double jabbed in the booster than if you haven't had it because you're going, it's tested on animals and all that kind of thing. And you think to yourself, well, that's a very good, it's a great rationale. But, I mean, if you want to be selfish and die.
BC.
This is Jonathan in Deal, who says, I used to buy an album on cassette and listen to it on the Walkman until it was almost worn out. Now I've got instant access to millions of songs. I seem to be constantly skipping through them. Spoiled for choice, I guess. Or maybe the tunes don't feel so important. Thanks for the show, says Jonathan. Worth waking up far too early for. Well, Jonathan, delighted that you are, whatever else you're listening to LBC at this time. And welcome. Thank you very much for that. And you're right. I think there is a sense that music becomes less important the more of it that there is. And I remember clearly again in school going on a school trip to the French Alps in 1989. And for some reason it was felt appropriate rather than fly there.
It really did. Jonathan in Deal says, as you've been saying, wearing a mask mostly helps stop the spread of infection. We've been double masking for a while now. I think it's worth doing. I've never double masked.
James O'Brien.
It is 20 minutes after 10. Jonathan in my inbox. I'm going to have to start using it. Keith, remind me next week, a new week resolution. Start paying a little bit more attention. Some of the texts and tweets that come into the show these days are hilarious, especially the ones that I have to read to the end to realise just how hilarious they are. Jonathan in Deal says, Dear James, there's nothing at all wrong with Carrie Johnson doing work in our government. My wife is a district nurse. I'm always popping round to patients' homes to provide treatment when I'm not too busy painting. Thank you, Jonathan.
Jonathan in Deal, been listening all day to the outrage over the party. What scares me the most is I know it won't make any difference. Boris's gang will carry on regardless.
Honestly, everybody's got to have the heating on, unless, of course, you don't have it. Jonathan says, I do love Christmas decorations, especially the lights. What I don't like is the constant flashing lights. Not sure how manically strobing, dazzling fairy lights. They're either pretty or festive. Please make them stop. No, I like lights that do all of it. They flash, they fade in and out, different colour. Oh, I love that. I just wish they'd change the colours.
Deal, Jonathan says, I'm afraid this is just a flash in the pan. It's only due to the Patterson mess. Do you think that will be the spin? Do you think Patterson's going to be chucked under the bus again by the Conservatives? Actually, I can see that narrative developing. I can see in the next few days, whether it's said explicitly or not, or whether it's implied, or whether it's done in briefings, I can hear already noises coming, I think, from the Conservative Party saying, well, obviously this was a seat where the disgraced former MP behaved in such a way that the electorate decided to take out their anger by kicking us out and voting for someone else. Of course, what they'll draw a veil over is that for about 12 hours they did everything in their power to change the rules to protect Owen Paterson. That won't be mentioned as part of any defence along the lines that I've just outlined.
This about it, Christmas morning or not. And Jonathan in Deal, it's a disaster for the businesses that depend on this season. However, for the punters, it's essentially just a night out. I wonder if a symptom of the pandemic might be a loss of perspective. Well, Jonathan, I don't know. I was struck by Joe and Will, who we've heard from already. It seems to me have been doing everything they can during the pandemic.
The TV debate says, Jonathan, Krishnan was easily my favourite for Prime Minister. The others are dreadful. Have a great show. Jonathan, thank you. And the best Prime Minister we have never had is Ian Dale.
See, turkey chicks have been left at a sanctuary after being liberated from farms. What's the point of liberating them? How many turkeys did we eat last year? 10 million. No point in liberating 70. They're only going to be eaten at the end of the day, I should imagine. Liberating the turkey means they'll not be eaten. We did the same thing with some hens. They make great pets, says Jonathan in Deal. Yeah, they always say that, though, don't they? They always have every year. You can always tell there's going to be a story in the paper. There'll be a pig liberated from the abattoir or something like that. I seem to remember over the last few years we've had pigs liberated and things. You think, no, they will be eaten at some point. That's the trouble. People forget very, very quickly. Very quickly. Somebody says, you say experts think a vegan diet is unhealthy. Well, listen, a chief nutritionist at a university college in London, you don't get any higher than that, says that a vegan diet is unhealthy. You need some protein in it. And then this person says, remember, there are plenty of experts saying masks and vaccines don't work. They're talking rubbish too. Of course, listen, you'll always find opposing arguments for just about everything. But, however, masks and vaccines do work. Who knows? Vegan food, definitely bad for you, Steve, but please don't tell the 80 million vegan people. They probably think they're managing fine without meat. You do need a little bit of meat, I'm told. Doctors have said you need a bit to balance up. You can't just survive on vegan food. You need your protein, don't you? That's what you need. You don't have to have loads of it, just got to have a little bit of it. And I don't know why. Do people eat it because they think it's very healthy, or are people eating it because they want a different lifestyle, or are people eating it because they don't want to eat animals? It's probably a combination of all of them. Animal cruelty. I have to be honest. I mean, if you've seen the way they dispatch animals, you'd probably... another one. Here we go. Vegan food could be bad for you. Is this the story about the guy who choked on the salad baguette? No. No. This is people saying that you need a bit of meat in your diet. It's good for you. It's as simple as that. So what have we got here?
We love wokeism stories. Ian, I'm not sure, says Jonathan, how a content warning will hurt anyone. I sometimes see them on the screen just before a TV programme. News programmes do them. Online news services often say, be distressing images. And what it means is someone will point out that someone has been killed in an incident, and there'll be a sort of blurred body in the background and stuff. So that's their sort of warning. And it's not really about warning you, it's just warning Ofcom that this is coming up. That's what they're doing. It's a bit like if you're playing a game. I'm playing a game at the moment, and every time you have to log in, it says some people might get, and it talks about epileptic fits because you've been watching too much video gaming. Doesn't spoil my enjoyment. People often make a decision whether or not to use something by reading the synopsis. What's the problem? Great show, says Jonathan in Deal. Coming up then, the six...
Okay, isn't it? I mean, I used to have drunk all sorts of bottled water. I don't drink out the tap. I don't do that at all. Another one here. Jonathan says, I've just read a thing suggesting vegetarian folk can live up to 10 years longer than meat eaters. Unfortunately, a myth. Unfortunately, a myth. No, you're going to die eventually, Jonathan. It's as simple as that. Maybe it just feels like they're living 10 years longer. Yes. In fact, they're really not. Really not. Apparently, about 375 million people in the world don't eat meat at all, says Jonathan. We don't need to eat meat. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You need protein. You need protein. And also, I love the way people exaggerate the figures. 375 million people and one. It's all exaggerated. It's all exaggerated. Listen, you're never going to get rid of meat eating. Never. Meat eaters are the majority. There might be 375 million people in the world who don't eat meat at all. So you say. But you don't know them. Let's go around and ask them, shall we? OK, call in now. We'll probably find about 10 people who don't eat meat. So that's the way it goes. Sophie's in Hornchurch, a cold winter's morning. It is a bit chilly, isn't it? It is a bit chilly, but no ice.
4 is the time. Couple of emails concerning our conversation about getting into employment. Jonathan in Deal, you talk about the unemployed people as if they're criminal. As a long-term taxpayer, I know or hope they'd be helpful for me if I lose my job, just like those people you describe in the bus queue. That's, of course, waiting. But the point is, Jonathan, as long as you go and try and seek employment, you'll be just fine. Same subject, Jamie Morgan in Camberley. There's thousands of people having their wages topped up by universal credit. Tackle the cost of living and housing. Work becomes more viable.
560600973. But Jonathan, who's down in Kent, he said, for context, can you tell us how many children were referred for mental health help before the pandemic? Because I've been hammering on about the pandemic. Yeah, well, all I've got is 2019 now. So bearing in mind the 6 months of 2021 that I spoke to you about, referrals to the NHS for mental health crisis, just under 410,000 children in just 6 months referred. Back in 2019, that number was around about the 250,000 mark. So let's have a look. The Royal College of Psychiatrists, self-harm, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts. In the same 6 month period in 2019, 230,000. So that's a simply enormous increase in referrals for under 18. Sorry, that's the only numbers I've got.
Theo Usherwood reporting. Thank you for that. A couple of emails coming in. Jonathan says, this is incredible radio. You vilified rail workers. Not long ago they were the heroes. Now it's the turn of teachers. Soon it'll be the doctors. I think there's two ways to read the word incredible. I don't think yours is in the positive context. On the subject of hugging, Andy says the school...
Morning, Jonathan says, you mentioned the 20 million downloads, 21.5 million, thank you. He says, I think probably it's one person downloading it 20 million times. Of course, listen, who cares? It's a number. It's a number. And then Hannah in Derby, Putin was not a market trader, he was an intelligence officer. No, dear, before that, he was a market trader. All right, honestly, nothing worse than people who are ill-informed. Goodness sake, honestly.
Mog is disgusting, though, says Jonathan in Deal. It's a game of top trumps. Then anything other than possible nuclear war is fluff, including cancer, COVID, murder, paedophilia, etc., etc. Do you think that Partygate has been forgotten now? Should it be forgotten? Is it irrelevant and trivial with what else is happening in the world? I think people haven't... I don't think people have forgotten it. I just think that...
Jonathan in Deal, I'm no royalist, but can't you give this poor woman a break? Whether or not turning up in a wheelchair is a good thing for her, she's in her 90s. She might not want to go. Isn't that enough? Well, sadly, actually, Jonathan, it probably isn't, because this is a woman who, we're very fortunate, her entire life has been about duty. She understands duty, duty, duty. And if it is the state opening of Parliament with the Queen's speech, really there is only one person who can do it. So that's why it is a bit... I hear what you're saying, cut the 96-year-old woman a break, but she's unlike any other 96-year-old woman that I've certainly ever encountered, or am likely to. What about the idea, though, of her being seen in a wheelchair? To Nick in Ilford. Nick, you're on the radio. Good morning.
84850, Steve at LBC. Jonathan says, you're forgetting Jesus had a beard. Well, you don't know that. You're just going by pictures, aren't you? They've given him a beard. You don't know whether he had a beard. I mean, you certainly don't know whether God had a beard or not. I think God was clean-shaven. And Santa's got one. Well, I know all about that one, let me tell you. Are you really saying it's because they can't be bothered? Yeah. Yeah. Santa Claus cannot be bothered. Yeah. He's far too busy making toys and, checking his lists, twice, going to find out who's naughty or nice. And then he'll be coming to town. He sees you when you're sleeping. That one. And, no, we don't know that Jesus had a beard. Because in a lot of the pictures, he just had sort of fairly long hair. Obviously, they didn't have a hairdresser in Galilee. And it was perhaps too expensive for him to do it. So lots of people grew beards. But we don't know whether he had a beard or not. He might have been a clean-shaven person. I know that his portrayal is of having a beard, but nobody knows for certain. There's nobody around who was around in his days. And as for God, I didn't think God was actually a person. I thought God was a being, I mean, who knows? Listen. Steve, I do it every other day in the bath. I think that's amazing. I really do. And Jonathan, you say God was a being. According to the Bible, he made man in his own image. So either he looks like a man or we all look like beings. Well, it depends what you believe in the Bible. It depends whether you believe that God created heaven and earth in 7 days. Sorry, 6 days, because he rested on the 7th. Or whether or not it was the Big Bang. There is a very good argument for suggesting that actually it wasn't God who made it at all. It came from somebody else. Although how they work these things out, I've got no idea, because at some point, animals must have manifested themselves. Lions, tigers, giraffes. We can't all be descended from apes. That would just be ridiculous. I don't believe there was a Garden of Gethsemane. I think there might have been sort of somewhere that people went, to have a little wander about and a sit. But I don't believe anything like that at all. And as for the Virgin Mary, we weren't too sure about that one either, were we? Because I think we all know what she did for a living. But too early in the day to go for there. Too early in the day.
Over.
Great speaking with you. Thanks for the work you do in that very complex field. The name of that book again, and here's from someone who is an investigator herself, and she says she's learned from it, so if she's good enough to say that, I'm sure we all can. The Little Book of Big Scams. Now, if your county force can't get it to you, or West Mids or Greater Manchester, whatever, go on the Metropolitan Police website. It is apparently available there. Nikki, thank you. That's on the policing side. Should we try an India? This is a joke. He says, I've just downloaded the Little Book of Big Scams. It was a computer virus. It's taken control of my computer and my bank. I'm now skinned. That is a joke, by the way, but Jonathan, that did make me smile. You have a dark sense of humour, I sense.
This computer that can be bought for not very many pounds indeed, that you can write your own programs on and such like. Jonathan in Deal, I use an iPhone, it's amazing, but I still have a secret BlackBerry Curve in the man drawer. Occasionally I'll bump into it while rummaging around for something else, take it out, charge it, and just hold it in my hand. I know it's wrong, but it feels so right. Step away. Jonathan, thank you. Nick Ferrari from 7 right now. Here comes Steve Allen.
Whee! Well, I mean, I've got loads of iPods.
Back to parties. Jonathan in Deal. Nick, you say we've all done it. Maybe I've forgotten to put my mask on when entering the supermarket and then put it on when I've realised. I've never forgotten not to throw or attend a party in a government building. Jason in Putney, I care about the Zoom party. He makes the rules, he breaks the rules. It's not the same as forgetting your mask, is it? 3 minutes before.
Call 0345 6060 973.
Jonathan's in Deal this morning. Tom, my wife was forced to give up the car. She now drives an electric bike. 30-mile round trip, all for 10p. Nipping through traffic, the journey only takes 20 minutes longer. Wouldn't have chosen this, but it's actually made her fitter and happier. Who knew? Says Jonathan. Maybe that's the solution.
Jonathan in, where are you? In Deal, in Kent. You're keen to get folk back to work. Some say the risk is too great. I saw the video showing the massive borrowing. It's scary. But is there any way you can explain exactly how this debt will impact on our lives? How much extra tax will I have to pay each month? Well, check out, Jonathan, thank you for looking at the video. Be like Jonathan, check it out on at Nick Ferrari LBC. It involves me, buckets, dyed water and fish tanks. The Prime Minister says he's not minded to increase tax, but that doesn't mean he won't do it.
Conversation, LBC, with James O'Brien.
21 minutes after 11. I sometimes stare at texts thinking, what's that about? I'm like, what? This is from Jonathan in Deal. He says, James, what's the plural of moose? And then Asterisk shakes head. Asterisk. Did I say mooses on the radio? Did I say mooses? It's like saying sheeps. It's moose, right? The plural of moose is moose. There's 100 moose. Meese? Mice? Me say many, many. All right, sorry. You see what I mean about staring at text and thinking, what is this happening now? Comedy. I read...
For now, Jonathan in Deal. When I was a kid, my dad's job was so stressful, but he had to pay the mortgage with 4 children. Wish I could go back in time and find a way to make him leave that job. I wouldn't mind if he had to live in a tent. Later on, he did leave. He became the man he should have been. Better late than never. Let's talk boosters and whether you're getting your boosters.